What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a lot of volleyball to get into, as we had a lot of volleyball this past weekend. As what a First Point Collegiate Challenge that was held in Austin, Texas, as Ohio State knocks off No.1 UCLA. How did the Buckeyes do it, and did they have a little bit of a hangover against USC? Also, Stanford looked pretty good as they took down Ball State and Penn State. Are the Cardinal for real? Also, Long Beach State went undefeated in NJIT, knocking off the Highlanders and George Mason. And Week 4 has not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 top 5 matchups in the NCAA men's volleyball world. Also, Pro Volleyball Federation kicks off this weekend, as we will get 3 matchups to watch for this week. So hand me a volleyball, set the net, because I'm about to start up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on iSports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday morning, Monday evening, Monday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way into episode 230 of Set Point. And without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without iSports Radio providing the platform to go live on Spreaker. Please do follow iSports Radio on several different social media platforms such as X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, and on Instagram. We also have a Facebook page for those that still use Facebook. All you just have to do is type in the word IE Sports Radio and then like us, and then boom, that's how you're able to follow us on Facebook. And we also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, for all your latest sports news, our blog, our Fans of the Month, our Hall of Fame, our pages dedicated to each podcast, such as Set Point, our community forum, and our merchandise shop. For the last 9 years, going on 10 years, iSports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, which is what I did this past weekend, and other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making iSports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. A huge shout out to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky. Planet Jerky is the official jerky of the 2022 California League champion Lake Elsinore Storm, the single-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. This all-brisket jerky has gluten-free options, contains no MSG, no sodium nitrate, it's low in sugar, and high in protein. This is some of the best jerky you can get your hands on, and all you have to do is visit www.planetjerky.net and place your order. In addition, prices are slashed on the Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky website, and if you buy $50 or more worth of orders, you will get shipping for free. Once again, a huge shout out to our sponsor, Planet Jerky Premium Brisket Beef Jerky, the jerky that's on a whole other planet. And the way you can follow Set Point on social media is on X, formerly known as Twitter, @set_point_IE, and on Instagram, @set_point_IESR. And I posted a lot of content. I should be getting the highlights from each of the matches posted sooner rather than later. And you can follow me personally on X, formerly known as Twitter, @TeranRodriguez1, which is where I'm mainly active. And without any further delay, let us begin. So it was actually a little bit of a quiet week in the NCAA men's volleyball world, as there weren't too many flashy upsets. So let's just jump on into the First Point Collegiate Challenge held in Austin, Texas, and it was super fun. I enjoyed covering the First Point Collegiate Challenge, even though there was a little bit of a blip in terms of my media credential. Unfortunately, no one knew I was going to be there as a member of the media, but it was all good. I eventually got a staff pass, and I was eventually able to cover the event, albeit I wasn't at the media table. But live and learn moment. All right, so the first match that happened in the First Point Collegiate Challenge was Ball State versus USC. Number 14 Ball State took on the number 13 Trojans, as the Cardinals actually saw the return of Tanashi Ndavazocheva. And believe it or not, I actually pronounced that name correctly. So the first set, Ball State actually got off to a pretty solid start. They led 15-12 at the halfway point, aka the media timeout, and they didn't really relinquish the lead as Tanashi just really strut his stuff. This was his first game, and the fact that he made a great first impression was quite phenomenal. USC did all that they could to try to take the lead back and take that first set, but Tanashi and the Cardinals just had other plans. They took the first set 25-21, and then the second set, it was quite the close set, as USC knew they needed to win that set. Otherwise, they would have been in a major pickle, as USC narrowly took that second set 25-23. The Trojans hit 345 in that set, only had 3 hitting errors, which was crucial. And it wasn't really Dylan Klein pulling all the weight. He got some help with Kyle Paulson, Jack Ducher, and Wes Smith. I'll be talking about him a little bit later. Then the third set, USC really started to kick it into overdrive as they took that third set 25-19. They weren't really in too much danger. The fourth set, it was a little bit closer, as Ball State actually had its opportunities to try and tie the set up, tie the set up by taking set 4, but they had a chance to tie set number 4 up in terms of trying to tie up the match. But USC had other plans. They eventually finished it off as they took set 4, 25-21. Wes Smith was phenomenal. He actually was my standout player of the match. He had 13 kills, he had 4 blocks, he hit 579. The 13 kills are actually the first time he's cracked double digits in his very bright career. Dylan Klein also had 11 kills. Kyle Paulson and Jack Ducher both had 9 kills. Ducher also added 7 digs to lead the way. As a team, USC hit 319, which I thought was pretty impressive. They blocked the living daylight out of the Cardinals, as they had 15 blocks to Ball State's 9. And they had 3 service aces, even though Ball State had one player dealing out all of the aces, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. For Ball State, Tanashi Ndavazocheva led the way with 23 kills. He had 6 service aces and 5 digs. That's a pretty good first game, considering he missed a good portion of the first 2 weeks. And then Patrick Rogers added 11 kills. And Ball State as a team hit 197, which isn't going to get the job done. So my takeaway for USC is this. It is so good to see Dylan Klein not having to pull the weight every single night. It actually is good to see Wes Smith stepping up. And he was one of the players I talked about because he actually was the number 1 recruit from the class of 2023. I was really impressed with Wes Smith. And honestly, USC's future is going to continue to get brighter. They not only have Dylan Klein and Wes Smith and a few other guys, but they have Sterling Foley coming in from the class of 2024. And I'm assuming he's going to be the number 1 recruit in the class of 2024. I have seen him play, and Sterling Foley is a beast. So USC in the up-and-coming years, I hope for their sake they can able to put together a strong roster and eventually maybe challenge their way to winning an NCAA championship. I definitely think they have the pieces, they have the coaching staff, they have everything going their way. For Ball State, this was kind of the case of Tanashi Ndavazocheva coming back, but he didn't really have the help that he needed. Obviously, Patrick Rogers has been key ever since Tanashi, unfortunately, was out. But they need that new Tanashi. They need a Tanashi 2.0 because Tanashi is kind of the Caleb Jennis of this year. He's kind of the new leader. And if you saw him play in person or on the live stream, he was legit ready to go. It looked like he had played his second match or his third match or his fourth match or his fifth, and so on and so forth. It looked like he didn't even skip a beat. But for Ball State, I was impressed with Tanashi and how he did not look anywhere near rusty. And thank you to Donan Cruz for passing along that Tanashi was indeed going to play. And I will just go on the record and say, if Ball State did not have Tanashi, I don't know if they take that first set. I'm not trying to say Ball State is bad, but with Tanashi, Ball State is a whole different team. Without him, they have to rely on some of their other young guys like Patrick Rogers and Aaron Hernandez. And in the chat room, Jen B says, have a great show, Teran. OHIO. And Ralph Cleese says, welcome back, Teran. Great coverage over there. Have a great show. Thank you, Ralph. And Larry B asks, how was your trip? It was great. I enjoyed it. I totally enjoyed being in Austin. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So the second match we had, as Jen B alluded to, was the Ohio State number 4 Buckeyes taking on number 1 UCLA. And this match was very fun. The first set went to UCLA as they took it 25-19. They weren't in too much danger as they held Ohio State to a 0 hitting percentage, and they only had 3 hitting errors. And then the second set, Ohio State kind of caught its second wind as they looked a whole lot better as they jumped out to an early lead. It was a 4-0 lead. But then UCLA, being the talented team that they were, they had other plans of basically not dropping that second set. Eventually, UCLA took the second set off of a monster block at the net, winning it 25-23. And suddenly UCLA was up 2-0 against Ohio State. Now, I was thinking at the time, is UCLA just that good, or is Ohio State finally getting a true test? Because they hadn't really been ultimately challenged. They played the likes of North Greenville, Damon, St. Francis, and UC San Diego. Not to offend any of those teams, but they're not on the level of UCLA or Ohio State. I mean, it was a miracle that UC San Diego pushed Ohio State to 5. So there was that right there. So for Ohio State, this was basically make or break time as they finally, I wouldn't say they finally arrived to the party, but they were able to get their you-know-what together, and they took the third set 25-18. I should also make note that Noah Plattfoot wasn't actually the setter in this match. It was actually Michael Wright, who I thought was a very unsung hero for the Buckeyes this weekend. And then the fourth set, Ohio State jumped out to an early lead. It looked like they were going to cruise on their way to a close victory, or a good victory in the fourth set, but UCLA had other plans. They wanted to end it in 4, but Ohio State, being the resilient, gritty team that they are, eventually took the fourth set 25-23 as UCLA unfortunately missed a serve. I'm going to be talking about those missed serves momentarily. But in the fifth set, Ohio State jumped out to a 4-0 lead. They led throughout most of the set. If not, they never trailed at all. And I don't even think it was tied, as UCLA got to within 1 multiple times. But at 14-13, Ohio State had a blasting bit kill from Jacob Pasteur, which ended the match as the Ohio State knocked off the number 1 UCLA Bruins 15-13 in set 5. So it was UCLA's first time they've gotten reverse swept since the 2022 NCAA tournament semifinals when Long Beach State came back to reverse sweep them. So obviously that loss stings for the Bruins, but as I told a couple of the players, it's better to lose now than lose in the MPSF tournament or lose in the NCAA tournament. And Ohio State, there's a reason why Ohio State is really good. And I should also mention, no offense to UCLA fans, but for Ohio State, ladies and gentlemen, they got him. They got him. As Ohio State had him, a.k.a. Jacob Pasteur, leading the way with 23 kills. He hit 500 for the match. He had 7 digs. He also had 2 service aces. Jacob Pasteur is the catalyst for this team. And that's why I kind of call him. That's why I refer to him as him. And then Shane Wetzel, he also helped take a little bit of pressure off of Jacob Pasteur as he had 13 kills. Obviously, he didn't have the monster night that Jacob had, but honestly, Shane Wetzel was just as phenomenal. He's kind of the Robin to Jacob's Batman. Ben Putnam is also another name to watch out for. He is only a freshman, and he is making big plays. He had 8 kills, and he also had 8 digs, which was second on the team behind Thomas Poole's 9 digs. And then Cole Young also added 8 kills to go along with his 5 blocks and his .462 hitting percentage. So my takeaway for Ohio State is this. I think after this win, I think it's time we shed the whole dark horse label or semi-contender label. I think Ohio State is a contender to win the national championship. The funny thing is that UCLA hit 366 and they still lost. Ohio State hit 305 and they managed to win. It just goes to show that there are other stats that are taken into consideration, as Ohio State barely outblocked UCLA 12-11.5. They outdug UCLA 34-27. They barely outaced them, but they had 7 few service errors. As UCLA, what really hurt UCLA was the service errors. They had 30 service errors. That's not going to get the job done. And honestly, they also had 15 hitting errors, although Ohio State had 21. But it's so weird seeing that UCLA had hit 366 and they still lost. It just goes to show that you could have one of the best offenses, but your defense has got to be up to snuff. The serving, I know you got to serve tough, but you just can't have 30 service errors. It's not going to help you win. Ethan Champlin led the Bruins with 18 kills. He also had 4 digs, 3 blocks, and he hit .297. Cooper Robinson had 11 kills. He hit .364. Ido David, he had 7 kills. And Guy Guinness had 6 kills. But my takeaway for UCLA is this. I think they'll be fine going forward. And if everyone thought that they were just going to go undefeated, you had another thing coming. I don't think anyone was thinking UCLA was going to go undefeated. I thought UCLA needed this as a little bit of a wake-up call, just because there are other good teams that's not named them. They've got Long Beach State on the horizon. They don't play Hawaii, but that's still a team to watch for. They've got Stanford and MPSF play. USC looks a little legit. Grand Canyon, they haven't really had a big test, but that could be a team that could challenge the Bruins. So I think UCLA just needed this loss. I really think that they just needed a little bit of a wake-up call, just because I feel UCLA, they had played it a little bit close against Lewis, and I think that kind of was a little bit of a red flag saying UCLA isn't all that invincible. But at the same time, they just need a little bit of a wake-up call, a little bit of a reality check saying, you know what, we're not as invincible as we thought we were. And that's okay, because the MIVA is actually pretty good. You saw Lewis taking on UCLA. They looked so much better than what their ranking showed. Loyola obviously got swept by UCLA, but I think that was a little bit of UCLA just having, I wouldn't say a perfect night, but the night that they wanted. So I think for UCLA, they're going to be fine going forward. I don't think they are going to have any sort of panic. I don't think anyone is going to basically say UCLA has fallen off. So all in all for UCLA, I think they're good going forward. Then the last match of day number 1 was number 7 Penn State taking on number 8 Stanford. And I was a little skeptical of this match, but honestly, I knew Stanford was going to be a very formidable opponent because Stanford had been battle-tested. Penn State has been semi-battle-tested, but not as battle-tested as Stanford. All of Stanford's wins going into that match were against ranked opponents. They beat Loyola twice, albeit one of the matches was Loyola's backups. And then they also beat UC Santa Barbara twice on the road. I thought that was pretty solid, if you ask me, especially since Santa Barbara almost had the reverse sweep in their pocket. But to the credit of Stanford, they honestly rose to the occasion, as Stanford in this match swept Penn State 25-21, 25-21, and 25-19. The first set, Penn State actually led for quite a bit, but Stanford just caught their second win, and they had the man, the myth, the legend, Will Rotman. He actually didn't lead the team in kills, as Moses Wagner had 15 kills. He's a sophomore, and he hit .423, and he also had 4 blocks to go along with 3 digs. With Moses Wagner in the fold, it really takes a whole lot of pressure off of Will Rotman and Alex Rotman. And Adam Chang actually got his first start at middle blocker. He had 5 kills as he hit .714, and he had 5 blocks to go along with that. So all in all for Stanford, they hit .341 while holding Penn State to .119. I was generally impressed by the Cardinal. This was another big challenge for them, and honestly, they passed with flying colors. Now, for Penn State, here's the thing. You're starting a freshman setter in Michael Schwob. Obviously, it's not going to be easy, as my takeaway for Penn State is this. I feel that they kind of, I wouldn't say got exposed, but I will say that this was their biggest challenge compared to their other previous matches. They played the likes of North Greenville. I think they played Central State. They played Lewis, which pushed them to 5 at home, mind you. So all in all for Penn State, I think this was kind of the slap in the face or slap back down to earth that Penn State kind of needed. Because eventually this is where the schedule starts to pick up for them. They took on Stanford. They had UCLA the following day. And this week they've got Ohio State on the road and at home in that order. As John Kerr led Penn State with 12 kills, Mihal Kowal also had 7 kills. Owen Rose and Toby Ezeonu each had 4 kills. Back to Stanford. My takeaway for Stanford is this. One player that has been an unsung hero is Luke Turner. Now, if you know who Luke Turner is, he actually is a primary outside hitter, but Stanford needed a libero, and they turned to Luke Turner and said, you know what? Go ahead and give me that libero jersey. And honestly, he has been definitely something special, and it really is refreshing to see someone stepping up, kind of like how Dane Chalmers had to play libero for UC Santa Barbara, but I digress on that, as well as Brett Sheward playing libero as opposed to his setter position. But for an outside hitter to play libero, Luke Turner has really stepped up, and he led Stanford with 8 digs, which I thought was pretty impressive. And the funny thing is that Penn State actually outdug Stanford barely. And they also barely outblocked Stanford by a smidge. But for Stanford, they just had everything going on in terms of their offensive output. And I just thought that Stanford just looked comfortable. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Michael Schwob. But this is one of those live and learn moments because he's a freshman. And the fact that Mark Pavlik started him over the likes of Josh Rosenblum, who is experienced as he transferred from Long Beach State, says a lot about Schwob. So that is that for that first day of the First Point Collegiate Challenge. Now let's jump to day number 2 as the Ohio State took on USC to kick off the second day. And it was actually a fun match beforehand as Matty Skinner, the outside hitter for the University of Texas, who helped the Longhorns win a national championship and was named the most outstanding player, she actually got to do the honorary coin toss. So I thought that was pretty awesome, if you ask me. As the first set, Ohio State actually took it 25-20. They got off to a strong start, and this is something you never really see from Ohio State, or you haven't really seen too much of Ohio State. They had a slow start against Damon. They had a slow start against St. Francis. They had a slow start against UC San Diego. They had a slow start against UCLA. But this time, they had a better start. They took the first set 25-20, and that was pretty good if you ask me. It's the first time they've won a first set since they played North Greenville. Let that sink in. And then the second set, Ohio State built off of that first set and took it 25-21. I was generally impressed, and I was thinking, okay, this is looking like Ohio State's win over UCLA was for real. But USC finally arrived to the party as Dylan Klein stepped up. Jack Ducher also stepped up as USC took that third set 25-20. I was impressed with how USC responded after that second set. Even when Ohio State tried to claw their way back into the match, the Trojans were able to respond very nicely. And then the fourth set, USC took that 25-18 as Jack Ducher, gotta get his name right, Jack Ducher was able to rise to the occasion. He actually did such a great job, and he is actually the captain for USC, as he definitely takes a lot of pressure off of Dylan Klein. And then the fifth set, it was so dramatic. It was actually tied 9-9 through the first 18 points. Ohio State led 8-7, and unfortunately for USC, errors really caught up to the Trojans. And the other unfortunate thing is they only had 3 kills, which means that they either had to bank on Ohio State missing in terms of its serves and their swings, or they had to basically score otherwise, whether it's via defense or via side out or whatnot. But 9-9, Ohio State went on a 6-3 run to end the fifth set as they won the fifth set 15-12, ending a really great match. as Ohio State was actually led by Shane Wetzel, who had 17 kills. Jacob Pastor had 13 kills. Ben Putnam had 10 kills to go along with the .381 hitting percentage. Like I said, Ben Putnam is a definite name to watch for, especially since he's only a freshman. Cole Young added 8 kills as he hit .500. He also had 4 blocks. As Ohio State hit .228. Interesting thing is that Ohio State did get out-hit by USC. They actually got out-hit by 100 as USC hit .330 for the match, and they out-blocked Ohio State by quite a bit, 15.5 to 6.5 to be exact. And USC also outdug Ohio State 29-23. The only big stat that Ohio State outdid USC in was service aces, as Ohio State had 15 service aces compared to USC's 4. For the Trojans, Jack Ducher led the way with 14 kills, while Dylan Klein had 12 kills. Wes Smith had 10 kills to go along with a .467 hitting percentage. And Smith actually had 5 digs, which you got to remember, he plays middle blocker / opposite. But Wes Smith getting 5 digs is pretty amazing, if you ask me. My takeaway for USC is this. This was definitely a missed opportunity for the Trojans to pick up a big-time win, especially against a team that had just upset the #1 team in the nation. So for USC, this is a tough loss for them, but I will say I was generally impressed by USC. For a team that doesn't have too many expectations, the Trojans definitely can build off this weekend, especially since they took on 2 quality opponents. And that was my biggest concern for USC. I thought that the level of competition really stepped up, and I thought USC answered the bell nicely. They could have easily folded after losing set 2 against Ohio State, but they eventually was able to force the 5th set, and they took Ohio State to the brink. And I would not be surprised if USC found a way to upset a few teams down the stretch. I'll be seeing USC a couple more times, and especially since their SID gave me an invite to go to all of their games, which I definitely will take that into consideration. So, great weekend for USC and for Ohio State. And Ohio State obviously really proved a lot to me. I basically said Ohio State really proved themselves, and it's not just the Jacob Pastor show. They have other players stepping up, such as Shane Wetzel, Ben Putnam, Cole Young. The list goes on and on. And in that match against Ohio State, or for Ohio State against USC, Noah Plattfoot actually was a part of a 6-2 offense. Yeah, it's something I haven't really seen from Kevin Burge. He ran a 6-2 offense as Noah Plattfoot and Michael Wright ran the offense. I've got to see a little bit of Jacob Pastor setting the ball, so it just goes to show how much Jacob Pastor is very valuable to the Buckeyes. Next up, we have Stanford taking on Ball State, and this was a little bit of a doozy of a match. This was the land of runs in this match, except for set 3. But Stanford took the opening set 25-9. They were up 11-1 at one point as Ball State, I don't know what happened with Ball State. Maybe they had a little bit of a hangover from the previous match, but Stanford just was on point. Will Rotman was on point with his serving, and I was wondering if he was ever going to miss a serve. But Stanford really punched Ball State in the mouth, and Stanford also hit .625 and only had 1 hitting error. And they held Ball State to -167. And this is the big part. Ball State had not one player crack 2 or more kills in that first set. They had 5 different players having 1 kill, which is perplexing if you ask me. Then the second set, Ball State kind of caught their second wind as despite a little bit of a comeback from Stanford, Ball State eventually took that second set 25-21. And then here is the crazy set. Third set. Stanford was up 24-21, but Ball State scores the next 3 points in a row. It's 24-24. And then Ball State has 2 set point opportunities, but unfortunately, Ball State just could not convert. It took Stanford 9 set points to take the third set against Ball State, but they eventually did as Ball State, to their dismay, hit the ball wide as Stanford took that third set 30-28. And then Stanford kind of rode the momentum into set 4, winning that one 25-18. And that's nothing against Ball State, but when you lose a very tight set and long and excruciating set like that, it's obviously going to affect your morale. So Stanford was led by Will Rotman, who had 22 kills. He hit 409. Moses Wagner added 15 kills. Alex Rotman had 7 kills. Stanford hit 303 in the match, while Ball State was held to only 185. But Ball State really blocked well. Ball State had 11 blocks compared to Stanford's 10. No, I'm sorry, Stanford's 8. And then the service aces / errors kind of went the way of Stanford, as Stanford missed one few serve, then Ball State. And then, like I said, Stanford was just serving missiles in that first set. That's kind of where most of their aces came in the match. So my takeaway for Stanford is this. I think they're definitely a team to watch for, and I definitely give them a good shot at possibly pulling off an upset here or there. This week they're on bye, so I expect them to train hard and basically rest up for their next matchup against CSUN next week. So I think Stanford is definitely a team to not underestimate. For Ball State, my takeaway for them is this. Obviously, this wasn't the result that they wanted, as Patrick Rogers led the way with 19 kills. He hit 500 for the match. Aaron Hernandez and Tanashi and Davazovcheva both had 9 kills. The problem was that they both hit under 100. And I think that's probably the case of Ball State being so gassed from yesterday and having to travel from across, I wouldn't say across the land, but basically just being gassed from that previous match where Stanford only had to go 3 sets with Penn State. So all in all for Ball State, I think they're going to get it better going forward. My only thing is for Ball State, can they take down some of the bigger teams that lie ahead? Because Ball State can easily take down some of the other teams that are like somewhat a little bit higher than them or below them. But when it comes to like bigger ranked teams like Stanford and BYU, I just don't see them taking it. And this is kind of a young team. I think Ball State is battling the youth and inexperienced bug. But I think Ball State will be just fine because the MIVA is going to be a gauntlet. There's not going to be one easy match. You've got Loyola that's up there. Ohio State is really proving itself. Lewis and Purdue Fort Wayne and Lindenwood and McKendree, they're also going to be up there. You also can't underestimate Queens, which is new to the conference, as well as Quincy. So for Ball State, they know that the MIVA is going to be such a gauntlet. But it's playing matches like these that are going to be so beneficial to them. And then the last match of the First Point Collegiate Challenge was number 1, UCLA taking on number 7, Penn State. And long story short, ladies and gentlemen, UCLA did not have a hangover. UCLA swept Penn State 25-20, 25-19, and 25-15. I just did not see any part of UCLA being in danger in this match, as I know Penn State kind of jumped out to some early leads in some of the sets, but UCLA just had no danger whatsoever. There was not a thought in my mind that said UCLA might actually lose a set to Penn State, as UCLA was led by Alex Knight, who had 9 kills, Io David and Zach Rama both had 6 kills, Merrick McHenry had 5 kills, Sean McQuiggan, who got the start at middle, he had 4 kills, Hide Nakamura, who I got to witness in junior college at Orange Coast College. He got the start at libero along with Luca Curci. It was libero 1 and libero 2, which it just goes to show that UCLA is reaping the benefits of the new, I don't know if this is actually official, but the whole benefits of playing 2 liberos, which I think is pretty cool, or dressing 2 liberos. But I digress. UCLA hit 354, while Penn State only hit 171, and just like John Sprout told me, he got to play some players that don't really get to see the floor. We got to see David Decker, David Flores, the transfer setter from Ball State. I thought UCLA just was very efficient, and that's the scary thing. They did not have one player crack double digits in kills, but they were able to be so clean and efficient, and all in all, they didn't miss 30 serves. And they held Penn State to no service aces, while Penn State missed 20 serves. And that's my takeaway for Penn State. This was kind of the case of inexperience for them, and unfortunately for Penn State, they're going to have a little bit of a rough time against some of the bigger teams. They did lose quite a bit to graduation, like Brett Wildman, Cal Fisher. Those are the 2 notable names that come to my mind. But they do have other players that are good. Will Coons actually led the way with 9 kills for Penn State, and that could be another weapon for the Nittany Lions, as he'll definitely help out John Kerr, Toby Ezeonu, Mihal Kowal, Michael Valenzi. The list goes on and on. Owen Rose. It just means that Penn State has a lot more tools in its toolbox, and it definitely helps Michael Schwob out, as Michael Schwob actually had some nice plays, as Schwob had a solo stuff at the net on Ethan Champlin. He also had a dump kill, and Schwob also led Penn State with 6 digs, which is pretty good. So all in all, for Penn State, I was impressed by them. Obviously, they got swept in both their matches, but I really want to see how they stack up against Ohio State this week, especially since that is technically a Big Ten matchup. I don't care what anyone says. Penn State versus Ohio State is still Big Ten in men's volleyball. Don't tell me otherwise. All right, and then some other notable matches that happened. Tuesday we had Princeton sweeping UC San Diego. Kind of not surprising just because Princeton is just so darn good. Not saying that UC San Diego isn't good, but against a talented team such as Princeton, who already has some big-time matches underneath its belt, I think Princeton kind of had the upper hand against the Tritons. I think this just goes to show that the Tritons were still inexperienced, and compared to the veteran presence that is Princeton, I think UC San Diego, unfortunately, just couldn't keep up with the Tigers. And UC San Diego got to play against Grand Canyon, but unfortunately was swept by the Lopes. Grand Canyon is still proving itself as one of the better teams in the nation, and they don't have a true win, but once MPSF play begins, and once they take on a true opponent, then that's when I'm going to be keeping my eyes on the Lopes. If you remember last week, Grand Canyon actually dropped a set to Lindenwood, but then responded nicely, and then they swept Lindenwood the second time. So, speaking of Princeton actually had to go 5 with CSUN. Princeton took the first 2 sets, and then CSUN took the next 2 sets, and then Princeton outlasted those Matadors in that 5th set, 16-14, taking that 5th set and ending the West Coast road trip off with a win. They're actually back in action tonight, as of this recording, as they play BYU at BYU, which that's going to be fun. Speaking of the Cougars, it's a perfect segue to go into this matchup. The Cougars defeated UC Santa Barbara in 4 sets on Friday, which I thought was pretty impressive. And then Long Beach State took down George Mason in 4 sets at NJIT. Now, that's kind of not surprising that George Mason took a set off of Long Beach State. Long Beach State is still kind of in its infancy stage of its season, and George Mason does have that big win against UC Irvine, and they've kind of been battle-tested against the Big West. The only Big West team they haven't really faced is Hawaii, which I kind of find pretty interesting, if you ask me. And then Saturday, BYU swept UC Santa Barbara, which I thought was impressive. This kind of takes away the narrative of BYU can't win on the road. I think BYU can win on the road. And with the amount of players that they return, they are definitely not a team to underestimate. And then there are some other notable results that happened, such as Pepperdine defeating McKendree in 4 sets on Friday. They dropped the 3rd set 22-25 after taking the first 2 sets. But Pepperdine took the 4th set 25-22, and Pepperdine followed up that win over McKendree with a sweep over McKendree. And then on Saturday, we had Long Beach State beating NJIT in 4 sets. Now, here's the thing. NJIT is a scrappy team, and they don't have much to lose if they're facing an opponent that is much, much, much better than them. But Long Beach State, they had a bit of a dogfight in that first set. It was 31-29 in favor of the Beach as Clark Godbold put down the kill. Then in set 2, NJIT was up 23-20 in favor of them, and they did not let go of the lead as they took the second set 25-22. Then Long Beach State kind of restored order, took the 3rd set 25-16, and then Long Beach State was able to outlast NJIT in the 4th set 25-22. Now NJIT had the alumni weekend. I applaud Danny Goncalves for doing that. Against Long Beach State, it's a little iffy, but I think having a lot of people in attendance and having alumni night against the number 2 team in the nation is definitely a good thing. And Long Beach State has to go all the way across the country from Long Beach, California, over to Newark, New Jersey, for that matter. So for Long Beach State, they're kind of getting a little bit of a taste of who's going to be of a bit of a tough test, because this upcoming week, Long Beach State has Pepperdine at home, and they also have Concordia Irvine the day after. That's going to be a little bit of the Pepperdine one I know is going to be a great match. The Concordia one, that's still going to be, I think the Golden Eagles are still, or the Eagles are basically still a work in progress, but I think it's still going to be a fun match regardless. And that's going to do it for the matches from week number 3. Mike Pat pops in the chat room. He says, listening on his way home, sir. Thank you, Mike. All right, so now let's get on into the new AVCA/NVA National Collegiate Men's Volleyball poll. So 20 through 16 consists of UC San Diego at 20, Charleston at 19, CSUN at 18, UC Santa Barbara at 17, and George Mason at 16. 15 through 11 consists of Ball State at 15, Princeton at 14, Loyola Chicago at 13, Lewis at 12, and USC at 11. 10 through 6 consists of Pepperdine at 10, Penn State at 9, BYU at 8, UC Irvine at 7, and Stanford at 6. 5 through 1 consists of Grand Canyon at 5, Hawaii at 4, Long Beach State at 3, UCLA at 2, and the new number 1 team in the AVCA/NVA National Collegiate Men's Volleyball Coaches Poll is Ohio State. Yes, the Ohio State is the new number 1. I'm a little surprised that they actually jumped from 4 all the way up to number 1. I get it, they have more convincing wins that Long Beach State does. I mean, their wins are only against LIU, St. Francis, George Mason, who is ranked, and then NJIT. But I'm a little surprised. I don't know, and this is no knock on Ohio State. If Long Beach State and Ohio State played, I don't know if Ohio State would come out on top. Now, if it's in Covalli Center, maybe Ohio State comes out on top, but not entirely sure. I mean, Ohio State has had its ups and downs. They had to go 4 with Damon. They had to go 4 with St. Francis. They had to go 5 with UC San Diego. They went 5 with UCLA, number 1 previously. They wound up winning. And they also had to go 5 with USC. So I am not entirely certain. I mean, you're going to be interested to see what I have to say in terms of my off the block, who I voted for in my off the block rankings or my off the block media poll. But Ohio State definitely has earned it for the most part. I just want to see how they do against Penn State. I'm fairly certain they might win, but Penn State is so scrappy. And Penn State, if you don't remember, Penn State and Ohio State, they actually played each other last year twice. They both split the regular season series, and with Ohio State actually beating then number 1 Penn State in its first week. And then the two also met with one another in the NCAA tournament in the quarterfinals, where Penn State took down Ohio State in 4 sets. But that was when Penn State had a lot of an experienced team with like I mentioned, Brett Wildman, Cal Fisher, a younger Toby Ezeonu. Ryan Merck was still doing his thing and still doing his thing at the libero for Penn State. So this week and going forward is going to answer a lot of questions, especially since Ohio State actually is going to after they play Penn State this week, they actually open up MIVA play, which is going to be very fun. Now the target is on Ohio State's back. As Jen says, wow, OH, and all I got to say is IO. Hoping to get a little bit of an interview with Kevin Birch this week. Still need to hear back from him. But that's going to do it for the AVCA Coaches Poll from this week. Now, for last week, the Off the Block Media Poll was released. And honestly, it was actually quite interesting. So, who I voted for in the Off the Block Coaches or the Off the Block Media Poll will actually perplex you. So in terms of the media poll, number 10 was... Oh, they didn't even have their media poll. Their media poll. But their media poll in the correct way. But all in all, once I pull it up real quick, I will say this about the the Off the Block media poll. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name. Why am I thinking of Through the Block? Off the Block. The Off the Block media poll was actually, and I'm not about to beat it around the bush when it comes to this, it was actually the same as what I voted for in the Off the Block media poll, which, oh my goodness. So, the Off the Block media poll consists of Lewis at 10, BYU at 9, UC Irvine at 8, Stanford at 7, Penn State 6, Ohio State 5, Grand Canyon 4, Hawaii 3, Long Beach State 2, and UCLA number 1. All of those that I just mentioned, I voted for. Those were my exact teams that I voted for in those exact places. And I basically put on Instagram, you can't make this up. Because Lewis deserves to be ranked in the Off the Block media poll in the top 10 because they upset BYU in Romeoville. But BYU doesn't deserve to be ranked behind Lewis because that's only their first loss of the season. UC Irvine obviously has that loss to George Mason, which obviously is no bueno. And Stanford and Penn State were both undefeated at the time. Ohio State was undefeated at the time. Grand Canyon has some solid wins over ranked opponents. Hawaii, I think, has been more battle-tested, even though they've only played Loyola and Emmanuel. Long Beach State is still that team, and then UCLA is still undefeated and was undefeated as they garnered all 10 first-place votes. But who I voted for this week in the Off the Block media poll, so number 10, I voted for USC. I think USC is starting to really prove themselves, and I think going 5 with Ohio State really says a lot about USC. I think that's more so of USC being a much better team than most people think that they are. And it kind of just goes to show that USC is a scary team because they have no expectations on them whatsoever. And they are shattering them as the days go by this season. Number 9, I had BYU. Their 2 wins over UC Santa Barbara are definitely good ones, as this week they've got UC Irvine, which I put at number 8. Now, UC Irvine didn't really beat anyone too big. They only beat McKendree, which I'm fairly certain they would have won, whether it's at McKendree or Crawford Hall or Brenny Vint Center or BYU, which is where they played last year. Number 7, I put down for Penn State, which Penn State unfortunately had a rough weekend. So I think number 7 is basically where they deserve to be. I mean, they obviously are much better than the record shows and what those 2 losses showed, but with Ohio State on its radar this upcoming week, I kind of have to wonder, can they really beat Ohio State? We'll see. Number 6, I actually put Grand Canyon at number 6, just because Grand Canyon, while they do have some notable wins, I think Stanford's wins are much more noticeable and much more bigger. And I put Stanford at number 5 just for that reason. Number 4, I put Hawaii just because they still have the 1 loss to Loyola, and they were idle last week. So no knock against the Rainbow Warriors. I'm not trying to say that they don't deserve to be number 3, but I think that Ohio State's win really shook things up. And I put Ohio State at number 3, which I know Ohio State fans are going to give me a lot of flack for this, but Ohio State, if they did not go 5 with USC, and they didn't go 5 with UC San Diego, and they didn't have to go 4 with St. Francis and Damon, I think I put Ohio State over UCLA, who is my number 2 in the Off the Block media poll. But I just think that those results I frown upon, just because how do you go 5 with UC San Diego at Covalli Center? How do you have to go 4 with Damon and St. Francis? I get it. It's any given night in terms of NCAA men's volleyball, but I'm just a little skeptical on that. And then UCLA, I put down at number 2 just because they only lost to Ohio State in 5. Contrary to what some people are saying, Ohio State did not sweep UCLA. Ohio State reverse swept UCLA. In other words, Ohio State won in 5 sets, not 3 sets. So let's get that out of the way. Ohio State did not sweep UCLA. Thank you for hearing my TED Talk. And then the number 1 team I had in the Off the Block media poll was Long Beach State. Now, I'm probably going to get some flack with this just because Long Beach State has gone 4 with NJIT and St. Francis, as well as George Mason. But I really think that they deserve that number 1 spot. Now, this week they're kind of going to get tested as they've got Pepperdine, which every NCAA men's volleyball fan has been licking their chops for the Pepperdine Long Beach State series to come back, or at least matchup to come back. But I think Long Beach State definitely is deserving of its number 1 status, in my opinion. I'm not saying that because I cover most of their matches, or I'm at most of their matches, as well as UC Irvine's. But all in all, for Long Beach State, I think they are the consensus number 1. Even though their schedule doesn't prove it, they do have the players. And I definitely would think, other than maybe UCLA, I would have them, and maybe Hawaii. Other than Hawaii or UCLA, I think I'd take Long Beach State against any team against them on their best day. So that is that for my Off the Block Media poll, as well as the Off the Block Media polls in general. Sorry if I kind of tripped up in the Off the Block Media polls in terms of seeing who was ranked and who was where, but I wanted to get that absolutely correct. So there you go. We're going to take ourselves a quick little commercial break. When we come back, we've got the Week 4 NCAA men's volleyball preview, as well as a little bit of NCAA women's volleyball transfer news, and the Pro Volleyball Federation begins this week. I got your preview right here and there. So you're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No, not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide through your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, enjoy hearing amazing sports stories, and respect all sports because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on the defining moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernick, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And welcome back to the second half of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows, as Adam Kernick's show, Chi-Town Weekly, will be going on in approximately and exactly 2 more hours. So Chicago fans, if you're looking for a show here on IE Sports Radio, Adam Kernick's got you covered. But on that note, let us get back on into the second half of Set Point. So Larry B actually asked, how was your trip? And like I said, it was a great trip. I enjoyed going to Austin and covering the First Point Collegiate Challenge. I actually also got to sightsee a little bit. I got to visit a few notable statues. I think I got to see the Willie Nelson statue, as well as the Sammy Ray Vaughan statue in Austin. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to meet up with Texas volleyball fans, which it is what it is. But I'll be around, hopefully, in the future. Maybe I'll go to a University of Texas volleyball match. Hopefully. But also, I definitely got to sightsee. I even got to see a Buc-ee's on my way back, as my brother and I actually drove from Austin back to Bedford, which is where he lives which is where he currently lives. And it was quite the drive. I even got to pass by the University of Baylor, which I thought was pretty nice. Maybe I'll attend a volleyball match there at the University of Baylor. But all in all, it was a fun trip, and maybe I might make a road trip out of this in terms of me coming back to the First Point Collegiate Challenge. But time will tell if I'll be back. And hopefully I'll have a better understanding of who to email and who to basically reach out to, so I'm not having to scramble and email the wrong person, because long story short, I actually emailed John Sproff. He can get me a media credential, which is not the guy you really want to not the guy you want to email in regards to that, but it is what it is. Alright, but yeah, I enjoyed my trip in Austin. It was actually my first time in Austin, and it was very fun. And it helped that the convention center was right by the hotel that I was staying at, which was perfect. The only thing is that day one, I actually went the longer way instead of the shorter way, so oops. Anyway, so let's get on into the better half of the show. Let's get on into the volleyball, because that's what y'all came to hear. Y'all didn't come to hear me talk about my trip in Austin. No. Oh, but one more thing I do want to mention is that I actually got to meet Jalen Rose. Believe it or not, his daughter, Gracie, plays volleyball, and her club volleyball, A5 volleyball, was actually playing in a club tournament at the Austin Convention Center. Elsewhere, it was farther away from the Collegiate Challenge, but Jalen Rose is a pretty cool dude, and his wife was definitely amazed and astounded that I had Set Point as a volleyball podcast. So all in all, I enjoyed meeting the Roses, and hopefully I do get to see Gracie Rose play in college. Who knows, maybe she'll get to be, and hopefully she gets to be just like Maddie and Avery Skinner, and she wins a national championship. So time will tell. But if she wants to do what she wants to do, then I'm not going to stop her. Patty Bax pops into the chat room. She says, "Hi, I'm in the office today, so couldn't jump in until now. Have a great rest of the show, and good luck with your job opportunities." Thank you, Patty. And then Ralph says, "Your coverage on X, formerly known as Twitter, was awesome, my friend. I just watched all your stuff posted." Thanks, Ralph. So I definitely also want to give a thank you to everyone that followed along on X as well as Instagram. And I definitely appreciate those that tuned into the coverage. I tried to basically put out highlights on my story and then post the interviews. I couldn't really post the interviews in time just because the interviews that I had on X were very long. They were 2 minutes plus. If not, they were pretty much up there. I unfortunately can't go past 2 minutes and 20 seconds just because that's standard X, formerly known as Twitter, rules. But I was able to post all of my interviews. I even got to interview Mick Haley, one of the directors of First Point Volleyball. And yes, he's one of the directors, not the founding fathers, contrary to what I said. And I was a little nervous just because Mick Haley is a huge deal. He's also the co-host of 6 Rotations with Daniel Gilman, who I got to have as a guest on this show. And he's also, in addition, Mick Haley is a former University of Texas and USC women's volleyball coach. And contrary to popular belief, he's not a Nebraska hater, in my opinion. He gave Nebraska their flowers, and he didn't really rub it in regards to Texas beating Nebraska and whatnot. So, all in all, he's a really great person. I hope to have him on as a guest for Set Point, but I don't know what his schedule's like. So you'll get that nice little 7-minute interview on Instagram, and then you'll get to hear me talk about 6 Rotations with Mick Haley. And honestly, I enjoyed interviewing him, and I also enjoyed reaching out to the First Point volleyball people. Like, after the event was over, I got to talk to some First Point volleyball people, the First Point media relations or their directors and whatnot, and they really enjoyed what I did, and I was like, I'm glad you liked it, and I'm glad they were able to squeeze me in, albeit I unfortunately couldn't be at the media table, but hey, the fact that I didn't have to pay to get in, and the fact that I was able to provide coverage on social media is quite nice. And I think that's pretty much it regarding everything in Austin and with the First Point Collegiate Challenge. I just enjoyed everything that the First Point Collegiate Challenge had, and hopefully, knock on wood, I'm able to come back next year. I mean, it will cost me a pretty penny, but hey, I gotta make that paper, whether it's hopefully in a career that I want in terms of journalism and whatnot, or I just have to make money in general. But all in all, that's going to basically do it for Austin as well as the First Point Collegiate Challenge. All right, now let's jump on into the actual volleyball. Let's jump on into the NCAA women's volleyball transfers. And there weren't too many notable transfers on my radar. Now, I could be wrong, and maybe I missed something, but I want to say that this was on Saturday. It was Friday or Saturday. Either way, it was actually officially posted on Friday, which was 3 days ago, that this transfer actually came over to their school. So Michelle Owobete, Michelle Owobete, the former UC Santa Barbara standout, she actually is transferring from UC Santa Barbara to Oregon, which is big time right there. And I want to say she's a graduate student, because if I remember correctly, she was phenomenal for UC Santa Barbara, but I did see that she was a senior. But if she's not a senior, then she probably has at least 2 more years. If not, she has at least 1 year remaining in terms of eligibility. But for Michelle Owobete transferring to Oregon, that's a huge deal because she teams up with Mimi Collier, which I think is so amazing. Or Mimi Collier. Why did I say Collier? I digress. Anyway, but Michelle Owobete put down 434 kills last season for UC Santa Barbara as she helped lead the Gauchos to the NCAA tournament. And as someone who has covered the Big West and who's seen UC Santa Barbara at least 2 times, I think Michelle Owabede going to Oregon is very scary for opposing teams. With that type of dynamic duo, I think that Oregon can definitely make waves in the Big Ten. That feels so weird saying Big Ten. I don't approve of it. Anyway, but yeah, Michelle Owabede transferring to Oregon, that is huge, and I can't wait to see what Oregon's offense looks like. Yes, Oregon did get hit hard in terms of graduation. Yes, they will have some other questions to answer in terms of the libero position, the setter position, the middle blocker position, etc., etc., etc. But I think Matt Ulmer's Ducks are going to be just fine. And then another notable transfer is Luana Emiliano, a senior setter who transfers from UT Rio Grande Valley over to Georgia Tech. And that's big just because Bella Diamaco transferred from Georgia Tech. So now it looks like Georgia Tech has found their setter. In addition, speaking of setters, Jackie Barrett transfers from Auburn to Baylor as she is a grad student setter, which that's big for Baylor considering Avery Carlson transferred to Texas. Now Jackie Barrett basically fills the void at setter for Baylor. Do I think Baylor is going to be a world beater next year? Not entirely certain, and I kind of doubt it, but hey, what can you do? And circling back to Oregon, Oregon actually picked up another big transfer as Mackenzie Morris will be transferring from Kansas State over to University of Oregon. So if you're keeping score here, Michelle Owabede and Mackenzie Morris. Mackenzie Morris is a paragon in terms of the libero position. And she was kind of the reason why Kansas State actually had a boxer's chance of making the NCAA tournament in women's volleyball. She actually led the entire Big 12 as she was actually a second-team All-Big 12 selection, which I'm a little perplexed by that. And she was a 4-year starter for Kansas State, and she averaged a little under 5 digs per set. And I think she might have led the entire NCAA in terms of digs overall. This is without the NCAA tournament. No NCAA tournament, and honestly, that's big time right there for Oregon getting a libero like that. And then also Danielle Courtley, a grad student outside hitter, transfers from Rice to Michigan State as she led Rice in kills with 414, and she also had 122 digs and 55 blocks. So Leah Johnson's Michigan State Spartans are really getting better by the day. That's like another big transfer from that they've picked up. And I would not be surprised if Michigan State kind of made a little bit of a push in terms of the Big Ten. I know the Big Ten is getting bigger, but honestly, Michigan State could be a sneaky good team. And then in other decision news, PK Kong, or I'm not even going to try to pronounce her first name, Kong, she actually will be returning for her final year at Louisville. So that's big time right there as she joins Anna DeBeer in terms of returners for Louisville. And remember, Louisville will be hosting the Final Four and the National Championship, which is very, very nice. And the fact that she had the best I'm coming back video might be the best I'm coming back video to end all I'm coming back videos, as she actually referenced Usher in her video, and she you got to watch it for yourself. I'm not going to spoil it just because it's absolutely amazing. And who knows, maybe Usher will make it to a match. But all in all, definitely check out that video. It's very, very amazing. All right, but that's that for all the notable NCAA women's volleyball transfers. If there are any other transfers that I might have missed this past week, do let me know. I try to keep up with that to the best of my ability. Unfortunately, me being in Austin, Texas for the First Point Collegiate Challenge kind of threw a wrench into that gear, but I digress. All right, but that is that for some NCAA women's volleyball news. Now, let's jump on into the Pro Volleyball Federation League, as it's going to be kicking off its season Wednesday as of this recording, as it's going to be the Atlanta Vibe versus the Omaha Supernovas. So this is courtesy of everyone that posted about the Pro Volleyball Federation. They actually released their selected order of finish, or the preseason polls. So Omaha actually is slated to finish first in the Pro Volleyball Federation as they garnered 33 points and 4 first-place votes. Atlanta Vibe garnered 32 points and 1 first-place vote. Columbus Fury had 23 points overall, along with Grand Rapids Rise. However, Columbus did garner 1 first-place vote. The San Diego Mojo is slated to finish 5th with 15 points. Orlando Valkyries are slated to finish 6th with 12 points. And the Vegas Thrill are slated to finish 7th with 9 points. That's kind of a little disrespectful for the West Coast teams, but I digress. So that's pretty much your projected order of finish, or the preseason poll or preseason selection of finish. Regardless, it's basically bulletin board material for everyone that's not named Omaha or that's not named Omaha. And then the preseason team is Leah Edmond of the Atlanta Vibe, Bethania De La Cruz of the Omaha Supernovas. Leah Edmond is on the Atlanta Vibe. Morgan Hentz, the Atlanta Vibe. Asia O'Neill, Columbus Fury. Claire Chaussee, Grand Rapids Rise. And Molly McCage of the Vegas Thrill. So those are your preseason all-league teams. And surprisingly, there's no setter, but I'm not gonna fester over that. But the first match of the Pro Volleyball Federation is, like I said, on Wednesday between the Atlanta Vibe as they head down to the CHI Health Center to take on the Omaha Supernovas. Now, I know Nebraska is so big on volleyball, so don't be surprised if there's like 8,000, maybe 9,000 in attendance, especially since this is the first match of the Pro Volleyball Federation League. However, if you can't make it, you will be able to have the chance to watch for free on the Stadium app or on the Bally Sports app, which is great. And hopefully, for my sake, I will be able to make it to a couple of Pro Volleyball Federation matches. The closest one would probably be with me going to is the San Diego Mojo matches, as they play in San Diego State's arena, which I think is pretty cool. I think it's cool. I think it's called the Vieras Center or Vieras Arena. Regardless, I think it's going to be a fun little league right there, and I'm excited to see what the Pro Volleyball Federation League can do in its first year. But there are more matches that's going to be happening this week. So on Thursday, January 25th, as of this recording, the Columbus Fury will be hitting the road to take on Grand Rapids Rise at the Van Andel Arena. So I forgot to mention the start time for these matches. So the Atlanta Vibe versus Omaha Supernovas match will start at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 7 p.m. where I'm at, being in Texas. And then the Columbus Fury versus Grand Rapids Rise match will start at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which will be 6 p.m. my time in Texas. And then to close out the week, we have the Atlanta Vibe taking on the Orlando Valkyries at the Edition Financial Arena. I want to say that's where UCF plays its matches, but I digress. So that match will start at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That'll be featured on Bally Sports Live, or Bally Live. And then the other two matches, Atlanta Vibe versus Omaha Supernovas versus Columbus Fury versus Grand Rapids Rise, they'll be streamed on Stadium. And before you all are skeptical on who they're going to get as some of their analysts, Emily Eamon of the Big Ten Network and Elena Sklar of Big Ten Volleyball will also be featured as analysts, which I think is pretty cool if you ask me. Hopefully they will be at some San Diego Mojo matches. If they are, I'm for sure going there. I don't care what it takes. I know it might be a pretty penny for me having to go down there. I know it might have to take me my entire day to get down there, but I don't care. Also, I gotta inquire on if I can work as a writer for them. Like I gotta get Set Point really up and going in terms of being big time. But that's going to do it for the Pro Volleyball Federation. Let's actually take a nice deep dive on who some of these players are on some of these teams. So we'll start with the Atlanta Vibe, which I like that name. That's a pretty poppin' name if you ask me. So they've got Whitney Bauer from BYU, Grace Cleveland from Purdue, Tori Dilfer Stringer, I'm assuming she got married, from Louisville, Leah Edmond from Kentucky, Casey Evans from Georgia, Shelly Fanning from Baylor, Morgan Hentz from Stanford, who is a beast of a libero, Camille Hayapo from BYU/Arizona. They got Magda Yalarashava from Washington State. If I mispronounced that, I'm sorry. Allie Linehan, I think that's how it's pronounced, from Kentucky. Cara McGee from Oregon/Baylor. Yes, I'm including their past schools. Don't judge me. Then they got Lecator member Monet from Pitt/Missouri. Then Marley Monserez from Florida and UCLA. Okay, this doesn't make sense. So Marley Monserez's schools are both listed, Florida and UCLA, but not everyone else. That's messed up. Anyway, so Chiamaka Nwokolo from Pitt, she's also on the Atlanta vibe. Reagan Pittman, the middle blocker from Minnesota, she's on the vibe. Yassiana Presley was just signed today, which I think is huge. Karis Watson from Clemson, middle blocker, she's on there. Presley, hailing from Baylor, is also something I need to note of. And their head coach is Todd I'm going to mispronounce this one. Todd DeGenis. Gosh. So that's the Atlanta Vibes roster. So now we jump on over to the Omaha Supernovas, and Nebraska/Omaha/anyone fan, don't judge me if I mispronounce any names. So let's actually introduce their head coach, just because that is who I am. So Shelton Collier is their head coach, while the assistant coach is Laura Bird-Coon, the former Texas A&M coach. And then John G, is that how his last name is pronounced? John G is the assistant coach. John Corbelli is another assistant coach. Laura Pilakowski-Buttermore is the head strength and conditioning coach. And do I really need to go? They have they got a lot of coaches here. They even got their athletic trainer, their physician, their nutritionist, and their mindset coach. Holy guacamole. Anyway, so for their rosters, Natalia Valentin Anderson from FIU. Then you got Sydney Hilly from Wisconsin, Kendall White from Penn State, Brooke Nuneviller from Oregon, Tori Dixon from Minnesota. I want to say she was from... Tori Dixon. I'm thinking of Tori Dilfer. So, my bad. Then you got Gina Munkuso-Prosowski from Nebraska. Again, Nebraska fans, don't judge me if I mispronounce any names. You got Jess Shaban-Landsman from Iowa/Louisiana State. You got Christina Vuchkova from Southwest University Neophyte. Woof. You got Kyla Swanson from Auburn/Illinois. Paige Briggs from Western Kentucky. Nia Kai Reed from Penn State. Allison Mayfield from Kansas. Bethania De La Cruz from... doesn't even say her school. What the frick? Gabby Thompson from Kentucky. Sophie Davis from James Madison. Maggie Cartwright from Arkansas. Emma Willis from Denver. Danielle Hart from Wisconsin rounds up the lineup. And that's pretty much the Omaha Supernovas right there. Next, we jump to the Columbus Fury, which Gen B says unleash the Fury, and that the Fury shall be unleashed. So first up, we have Gabby Blossom from Penn State/San Diego, Reagan Cooper from Texas Tech/Kansas, Megan Courtney Lush. So Megan Courtney, if you don't know who that is, she was on the U.S. national team for a little bit, as it looked like she got married. So she hails from Penn State. Samantha Dreschel, who hails from Maryland/Washington. Caitlin Horde from Penn State/Nebraska. Renell Jones from Maryland. Valeria Leon from Ohio State. Janasia Moore from Ohio State/Tennessee. Asia O'Neal, the number 1 overall pick from the Pro Volleyball Federation draft from Texas. Ivania Ortiz de Jesus from Hofstra and from outside of the U.S. Hofstra. So she's from Hofstra. Oh, that's pretty cool. Then you got Jenna Rosenthal from Marquette. Ray Marile Santos from Arkansas. Maria Schegel, whose school isn't even put down. Ashley Wenz from Ohio State and Arizona State. And the head coach is Angel Perez. And the assistant coach is Carlos Cardona, Jose Figueroa, and Alex Gordillo. All right, next up, you got the Grand Rapids Rise, as their roster consists of Simone Abbott from Northwestern, Sydney Bolding from Kansas State/Jacksonville, Kayla Caffey from Texas, Missouri, and Nebraska, Claire Chaussee from Louisville, Amelia Dimitrova, whose school isn't even put down there, but I digress, Ashley Evans from Purdue, Morgan Fingal from Tennessee, Nia Grant from Penn State, Maren Grote from Washington, Camila Gomez from Texas A&M, and I guess from Miami-Dade, Alyssa Jensen from Michigan State, Mac Podraza from Penn State/Ohio State, Erica Pritchard from Penn State/Maryland, Kenneth Sauer from Houston, Texas Tech, and Missouri, Shannon Scully from USC, Pepperdine, and Utah, Sarah Sponsel, the former AVP standout, from UCLA and LMU, and the head coach of the Grand Rapids Rise is Kathy George. I want to say she was the former Michigan... Yeah, she is the former Michigan State coach, and she's the all-time winningest Michigan State coach, which I think is pretty cool to see her back as a head coach again. Assistant coaches are Bill Walton, no, not the NBA player, Dennis Dimitrov, Mackenzie Welsh-Vasquez, Dave Getzoff, Diamond Dix. Oh, well, that's it for the coaches. I actually skipped all. I actually went down to their director of volleyball operations and their athletic trainer, as well as their head strength and conditioning coach. Not trying to basically take their introduction away from them, but I just don't want to go too long, which I'm probably going to be over 90 minutes. Anyway, so lastly, we've got the Orlando Valkyries, which surprisingly they don't have roster on their name. They do have the roster. It's just under team instead of roster. Anyway, first up we have Vanessa Agbortabi, whose school isn't put down. Then you got Ordara Ane from Utah, Casimir Brown from Kentucky, Paula Kriame from Indiana. I want to say she's from another school. I want to say she's from Florida as well, but I digress. Araya Cruz from Florida, Melissa Evans from NC State, Carly Graham from Rice, Shania Joseph from Florida, Blake Moeller from Purdue, Adeola Owokonrian from Duke. If I mispronounce any of these names, once again, I do apologize. Wilma Rivera from Louisville, Carly Skogit from Michigan. That's another AVP player. We're seeing a lot of these former AVP players return to the indoor scene. Michaela White from James Madison, and the head coach is Amy Pauley, who is also the vice president of volleyball operations. The assistant coach is Gordon Mayforth. Molly Stark is another assistant coach. Blake Omartian is another assistant coach, and that's pretty much it for all the coaching staff for all of these teams that are going to be playing this week. So I will get into the other two teams, the San Diego Mojo and the Vegas Thrill, once their time has come to play this week or their up-and-coming week. But that is pretty much that for all of the teams and their players and their coaching staff. I'm going to try my hardest because I definitely want to cover some Pro Volleyball Federation. And again, hopefully I can get like some sort of career out of it. I really want to get a career out of the Pro Volleyball Federation, whether it's as a writer or something along those lines. But that's going to do it for that. So while we're on the topic of Pro Volleyball, one NBA player or one NBA team is actually getting its season, not season underway, but they actually did have an event that happened this past Saturday. So the San Diego Wild, led by former Set Point guest and aka the Do-It-All Man, Nick England, and his San Diego Wild actually got to play a scrimmage against San Diego Miramar, which is actually quite fitting. In the end, the San Diego Wild were able to unofficially win that, as the San Diego Wild wound up sweeping the match 25-19, 25-16, and 25-20. Remember, it's an unofficial match, so it's not going to count toward anyone's record and whatnot. So, basically, it was actually live streamed on Instagram. Unfortunately, they weren't going to come in with the cameras and whatnot, but hey, it is what it is. Unfortunately, I really regret not seeing that match, but oh well, it is what it is. I'm going to be seeing the San Diego Wild later on in the season, as I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but the NBA isn't going to be starting until May. But there will be previews, as I plan to basically get them pumping out. So I can't really explain why, but all I can tell you is that the NBA will be starting in May. I really want to get the NBA going in terms of coverage, but it is what it is. All right, but that's that for all of the NBA. That's only the little gist of NBA news that we have so far, as unfortunately I hope to have more NBA news as the rest of spring comes by, as again, the season's not going to start till May, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. All right, but that's that for that. All right, now for NCAA men's volleyball week number 4. So tonight, as I mentioned, we have number 14 Princeton taking on number 8 BYU. The two teams will actually be playing tomorrow as well, as BYU has a huge week this week. They've got Princeton on Monday and Tuesday, which that's only the appetizer. The main course is coming on Friday and Saturday when they host UC Irvine. Now, good for BYU, though, is that they are going to be at home, which I think is going to be huge. However, I will just say, BYU just cannot prance and skip through these matches. They can't just coast through these matches thinking they're going to get an easy match. No, I think Princeton is definitely for real, especially since they're wrapping up their West Coast road trip. And then UC Irvine, they definitely want to prove themselves as a top 5 team as opposed to a top 10 team. So for BYU, I really think they are going to be tested this week, and it's going to be 4 fun matches. Then Wednesday, we have number 18 CSUN at number 11 USC. All right, for CSUN, this is their chance to really prove themselves. But USC is coming off of a great weekend where they went 1-1. They pushed Ohio State to 5, and they took down Ball State in 4. I can definitely see USC winning this matchup, especially since they're going to be back at home. But CSUN is no pushover. I think CSUN can definitely challenge USC, but with how USC played this past weekend, I really think that they definitely have what it takes, especially with players like Jack Ducher, Dylan Klein, Wes Smith, Kyle Paulson. The list goes on and on. Then on Thursday, we have probably the match of the week, the big match of the week, quote-unquote big, spelled B1G. Number 9, Penn State at number 1, Ohio State. The two teams will actually be playing on Sunday as well, but this time Penn State will be hosting. All right, if Penn State wants to prove that it definitely is a top 10 team, if not maybe a top 5 team, and they're definitely a potential threat to winning the NCAA championship, they got to really show up against Ohio State. They got to get the early jump on the Buckeyes, because if they don't, then Ohio State is going to be blasting them out of the Covalli Center. And Jacob Pastor is still him. He definitely is that guy. And he has a supporting cast around him. And possibly a 6'2 offense. And Thomas Poole, I gotta make note of him. He's definitely shining at the libero position. And then Penn State, obviously, with their young setter in Michael Schwob, I definitely think Penn State has a good shot at beating Ohio State. They don't have bad players. They actually have legit players like Toby Ezeonu, Owen Rose, Mihal Kowal, Will Coons. The list goes on and on for this team, for the Nittany Lions. It's just all about possibly putting it together. Oh, and Michael Valencia, I got to make note of him as well. Also on Thursday is number 17 UC Santa Barbara at number 2 UCLA. All right, UCLA gets a quality home match opponent at them at Pauley Pavilion. If not, they'll be playing at the John Wooden Center. Regardless, I think UCLA appears to be back on track. Based on how they were back on track against Penn State, they should be fine in this matchup. Now, Santa Barbara is a young and spry team. They actually are still searching for that big breakout win, but they're starting to come along quite nicely. I wouldn't be surprised if UC Santa Barbara took a set off of UCLA, but it's going to be so tough considering their team is so young and UCLA has loads of experience, especially with them being at home. So we'll see what happens with the Bruins and the Gauchos. Then we jump to Friday. Number 16, George Mason takes on number 12, Lewis. All right, if Lewis wants to pretty much stay within range of the top 10, they actually have to not underestimate their opponent. I think Lewis can definitely beat George Mason, but George Mason is so sneaky good. You never know which George Mason you're going to get. And honestly, I feel George Mason could possibly pull the upset. It's a nice little EIVA versus MIVA match, and these type of matchups are definitely what volleyball in NCAA men's aspect is all about. But I think we're in for a very good game right here. And like I mentioned, number 7 UC Irvine travels to Provo to take on number 8 BYU. This one can go either way. I think the Anteaters are definitely in the thick of still being a contender. My problem is, can they win on the road against BYU? Provo is such a tough place to win at. AK Smith Fieldhouse is so tough to win at. So if UC Irvine wants to pull off the upset, they actually have to serve tough for starters. Their defense has to be on point, and they need to get Hilir Heno and all of their other hitters going. Next up, we have number 2 UCLA at number 20 UC San Diego. So it's back-to-back nights for UCLA. The good thing is, and if you heard my interview with John Sparrow, they won't have to travel a whole lot. They don't travel to BYU this year. They don't travel to Grand Canyon. All their matches are pretty much going to be in California, which is huge for the Bruins. They don't have to travel on a plane and whatnot. So UCLA doesn't have to go too far. All they just got to do is take the bus, and they're a hop, skip, and a jump away. For UC San Diego, it's another one of these tough tests, but tough tests like these are definitely what's going to make them tougher and much better for Big West Conference play, because the Big West is going to be a gauntlet, and thankfully they are playing tough opponents. You could obviously schedule cupcake opponents and then be undefeated, but are you really getting better? No. I think scheduling the likes of UCLA and Ohio State and Grand Canyon are definite pluses. And then we have one of my matches of the week. I have a lot of good matches of the week. You got obviously Penn State, Ohio State, and you got BYU versus UC Irvine. But this matchup is probably a matchup that NCAA men's volleyball fans have been wanting for quite a bit. Number 10 Pepperdine at number 3 Long Beach State. This is going to be a fun match, and it really sucks that I am still in Texas. I would really want to go to this match, because I'm not going to be seeing Pepperdine unless I go to a USC match. But for Pepperdine, this is a big test for them. This is their chance to really prove themselves. Same for Long Beach State. If Long Beach State wants to actually be considered a number 1 team, they got to beat an opponent like this. And they can't struggle. I know Long Beach State is basically still trying to figure out the kinks with all their returning players and the new players and whatnot. But honestly, I really think that Long Beach State has a definite shot at winning. But don't underestimate Pepperdine. Pepperdine, I think, is a good team, and there's a reason why they're top 10. They haven't really lost, and they have some solid players. It's the battle of the unbeatens, which I think could go either way. I could definitely have that as a match of the week, if it weren't for Ohio State versus Penn State. But Pepperdine and Long Beach State is going to be fun. The two haven't played each other since before the pandemic. I remember going to Long Beach State versus Pepperdine match, and it was at the Walter Pyramid, and it was definitely a great match, and they even gave away free 2019 championship banners, which I thought was pretty cool. Then we jump to Saturday. Number 16, George Mason, hits the road to Chicago to take on number 13, Loyola. It's another EIVA versus MIVA match, as George Mason is going to be tested this week. as honestly, I am really looking forward to seeing what they can do against two teams on the road in the same state. So I think George Mason definitely has a shot, but for me, Loyola they're for real. I think they're as better as advertised. I just think that they don't get a whole lot of love just because they have a few losses here and there, and their only win, well, they beat two other opponents, but their only notable win is against Hawaii. So all in all, for Loyola, I think this is a good little gut check matchup just to see where they're at. Obviously, they have a young team, and I'm certain they have Dan Mangun back, but time will tell to see if they can really hang with any ranked team. And this is actually a good little appetizer just because MIVA play, if I'm not mistaken, starts next week. I know it starts for Ohio State, but I'm not sure about Loyola and the others. But I'm fairly certain it does, because if it starts for one team, it's got to start for the other. And then also on Saturday, like I mentioned, number 7 UC Irvine at number 8 BYU. I really think those two teams are going to have a nice little battle. And for UC Irvine, this is probably a little bit of a revenge match, just because last year the Ant Years lost twice at the Bren to BYU. Now UC Irvine, with a little bit more of an experienced team, I think they do have a shot against the Cougars. But the Cougars have to defend their home court. Not just once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times. It's going to be fun times for BYU. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Sunday we have number 1 Ohio State at number 9 Penn State. All right, this is going to be a very fun matchup right here. I think Penn State will be hosting, and this is actually going to be the first true road match for the Ohio State. I definitely think that the Buckeyes are probably going to win, but don't be surprised if Penn State gets a little bit of the crowd going, just because you love a nice little Big Ten versus Big Ten matchup. And I don't care what anyone says. It is a Big Ten matchup. It's Big Ten men's volleyball. Mark Pavlik said it in my interview with him. It doesn't matter if the league doesn't say Big Ten. You have Big Ten on your chest. You have it on your jersey. You have it on your clothing. So you are officially Big Ten. Don't argue otherwise, Big Ten fans. And I really liked it. And hopefully this is, for their sake, it is on the Big Ten Network. Because if it's not, we're going to have problems. But number 1 Ohio State takes on number 9 Penn State. And then closing out the week, we have number 4 Hawaii at number 15 Ball State. All right, Hawaii, after not having a match last week, is back at it, as they're actually going to be in Indiana throughout the entire week, as they have 2 sneaky good matchups earlier in the week. They have Purdue Fort Wayne on Thursday and Friday. Now, you're probably thinking, well, Hawaii should win those easily, right? No. Purdue Fort Wayne has John Diedrich, and I would not be surprised if Purdue Fort Wayne, along with their other returners, along with Diedrich, gave Hawaii a little bit of a run for their money. I know Purdue Fort Wayne hasn't really been overly the best, but I know they lost to NJIT most recently, but I think this is Purdue Fort Wayne's chance to really prove themselves before MIVA play. This is definitely a great matchup just because these two teams met in the Outrigger Invitational last year, and I think we could definitely be seeing some fireworks. I don't think Hawaii's going to lose this one, but Purdue Fort Wayne is legit. Now, as for the matchup between Hawaii and Ball State, I love this matchup. These two teams love to face one another, and they've been facing each other since the NCAA tournament from 2022. So Ball State is getting another big challenge, but this is why you schedule these tough teams. Again, they start off the season taking on the likes of Wabash and Thomas More, but now they're facing off against better teams in the rankings, and now they have this big matchup against Hawaii. I would not be surprised if Ball State, with Tanashi and Davazocheva, will look much better than they did in its previous matches, but again, expect Hawaii to come out on top, but you also have to factor in Hawaii's playing 3 matches in 4 nights. That is going to be something to factor in, and maybe there might be some tired feet, especially since they have to go from Purdue Fort Wayne over to Muncie, Indiana. So that's something to make note of, and that's a little bit of food for thought right there, and West Lafayette, to be exact. They go from West Lafayette to Muncie, and then they got to practice and get a feel for the gymnasium at Ball State. So we'll see what happens. Well, on that note, that's going to do it for the Week 4 NCAA men's volleyball matches to watch for. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. It is that time to drop the beat, because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Shout out to the chat room, Jen B, Patty Bax, Ralph Calise, Mike Pat, Larry B. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. And like I said, if you tuned in at any point of the show, whether it's on playback or live, or you were following along for the First Point Collegiate Challenge, I definitely appreciate you. So I will be back this Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, and keep your eyes out for a possible interview with Kevin Birch. Hopefully, for my sake, I'm able to get some sort of interview with him, just because I kind of got to stay true to my word of keeping up with one-on-one video interviews with players and coaches. But until then, have yourself a great rest of the evening. Enjoy the volleyball action, whether it's Pro Volleyball Federation or the NCAA men's volleyball scene. See you all Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!